Welcome everyone, Costine here with a discussion about diplomacy in Total War Warhammer 3 and to also talk about confederations in the game and how to achieve great diplomatic results, how to achieve confederation results, how to get those kind of confederation agreements with factions. This is a turn 71 campaign that I've been playing on my own as Boris Ursus. I have taken a significant swath of territory, but I've also gained a significant number of allies. I'm allied with Reichland, I'm allied with Balthazar Gelt, I'm allied with Grimgor, and I'm allied with Cafe. Now, pulling off that alliance between Grimgor and Cafe at the same time is a lot trickier than you might think, and let's start talking about that. See, some of the things you need to know when you're dealing with this kind of diplomatic situation is that you need to be concerned about like aversion. How does the AI feel towards you? Now, generally the limit that you can work with in a campaign is a -40 aversion limit. So Grimgor is within that particular limit of aversion, so you can actually maintain a diplomatic deal with him. However, there are a couple of problems, and I should note that in this particular campaign, I've had to constantly give Grimgor territory in order to keep him happy and maintain my alliance with him. And he did break it several times, though that's mainly on myself because I did get my reliability to a fairly low rating. But there's other aspects as well. One of the aspects that has made Grimgor less willing to work with me beyond just me messing around with reliability because there are certain factions that I wanted to wipe out at certain points. Beyond that, there's also the question of territory. We know, courtesy of Creative Assembly, that AI does want to take certain bits of territory. So regardless of how they feel towards you in other respects, if you hold that territory, the AI is going to want to take it from you. So they're liable to declare war on you or break military alliances and then declare war on you, which can create a significant number of issues, as you might imagine, in your campaign when you suddenly lose a military ally, or you end up losing your agreements with a faction that could be very friendly towards you. In the case of Grimgor, which I'm going to use for this particular video, he wants to take Zarnagrund. Now, I could have given it to him, but it's a tier 4 settlement and with a great deal of potential. I also believe that I put the endgame crisis to be the Chaos Dwarf one. So you can be certain that I want to maintain this damn place for myself when that endgame crisis kicks off for the Chaos Dwarfs, the Will of Hashut. But because I hold that territory that Grimgor wants, he has broken my military alliances multiple times. Now, the way to maintain an agreement despite that situation and despite doing things that a faction does dislike, because like you can look at Grimgor and you can see that he has a -100 towards me diplomatically on the basis of the fact that I've allied Cafe, I've allied Carcadrin, I've allied just in general the factions that he might start a war with. Well, I have traded him territory. Now, trading territory to a faction is a great way of getting things from that faction. Now, if you're wondering how I hold the challenge stone over here but still manage to give Grimgor the granite spikes, well, I traded away the challenge stone first, and then I traded away the granite spikes and the Valerie, and I was able to get the challenge stone back. That's because Grimgor will put a high level of value on the Valerie, in particular because there's a landmark here that he hasn't built, I might add, but there is a landmark here that is extremely useful for him to get his grubby little paws on. So that's the reason I was able to trade away this territory and maintain control of the challenge zone. Since I am playing Boris versus campaign, having a lot of territory in the cast waste is not necessarily a huge detriment. But I also want to prevent a war between Grimgor and Cafe, and that is a huge risk. Also, I want to prevent a war between Grimgor and the Dwarves, because both of them are my allies, and I want to keep them that way. I can potentially beat this entire game without having to fight Grimgor, and I think I would rather avoid having to fight Grimgor in this campaign. I mean, I'm already at war with, well, Queek, who is just like showing up with doom stacks at this particular point in this campaign. Well, he's got 2 full armies, 3 full armies over here, and he's fighting Karakadrin. The only saving grace for this particular army is, well, it's an encamp stance, and there's also the Dwarven armies over here that are going to slow them down. But there's enough issues that I've got in this entire campaign. Fun fact, by the way, Daniel, who starts here, has managed to conquer territory all the way here. I'm not quite sure how he managed, and he's even farther behind, like he's in the Shard Bastion. I'm not quite sure how exactly he managed to beat Sigvald. I think it has to do with the fact that maybe Sigvald fought Valkia, but it's like Sigvald is losing to Daniel. What parallel universe are we in right here? But when you're looking at maintaining this kind of multiracial, these kind of multiracial alliances, you got to be aware of how the various races feel towards one another. Of course, the dwarves and the greenskins despise one another. So, the way to avoid such a war between your allies is to prevent them from having territory that's connected to one another. And also having the same opponents that you're all dealing with will nullify some of that, though it's not going to be enough to completely eliminate the war. But like over here, the fact that both Karakadrin and Grimgor are at war with the Skaven in this situation is certainly a huge benefit that will prevent Grimgor from declaring war against Karakadrin or against myself. And that's something that's really going to help me out here. Of course, once we no longer have Skaven to fight, once Queek is dead, and well, considering what's heading his way, he will certainly be dead. I mean, just look at... You want to understand why Grimgor is biblical? Like, everything he's captured over here in the mountains more, like, I only gave him this province and the territory, and Crookback Mountain, basically, in this campaign. Everything else he has taken in his campaign, the Mountains of Morn, he has done so on his own. I mean, he's annihilating Kugaf, or finishing off Kugaf. He's got 2 full armies, 4 armies over here in this area, 6 armies in total, 7 armies, like if we're counting 8 armies, 9 armies. He's working on a 9th army over here. And these are, like, some of these armies are, of course, very weak, of course, but not all of them. Actually, I think at this point he doesn't really have that many weak armies, like all of his armies, except these 2 right here. Which I think this is his starting army, and he never lost a battle with it. But all of his armies, except the 1 or 2, are, like, really good armies. Like, you look at this one, this is a fairly solid Greenskin army. This one is a Greenskin Doomstack, Ragnarok, Black Orcs, River Trolls. Yeah, that's not something I would want to fight in battle. I mean, you've got more units here. So yeah, I would rather not have to fight Grimgor, but that's one of the ways you can prevent a war from happening diplomatically with your allies. This is also the reason I control the Eastern Steppes over here in Miaoying. Like, I used the same trick with Miaoying. Like, I gave her temporarily control of the Dragon Crossroads, and then gave her the Foundry of Bones, Red Fortress, traded that for her, and now I have a buffer over here between Miaoying and Grimgor, which reduces the chance of a war. The big concern, of course, is that Xiaoming, he's got a lot of armies on his own right over here that just might take a liking to Grimgor and wiping him out. I'm not quite sure who would win, really, between Grimgor and Xiaoming. I probably would put my money on Xiaoming. He just has a better auto-resolve situation. But this is, yeah, he's... Yeah, I always find it weird when people say that they've never seen Cafe win the war in Cafe. It's like, you sure about that? Because, like, most of the time I always see Cafe win. Rarely do I see them come close to losing, let alone being completely wiped out. Like Miaoying, yeah, I do certainly see her getting wiped out quite a few times, but generally Xiaoming just picks up the slack and annihilates his opponents. So that's the diplomacy aspect with, like, managing something like this, like a multiracial alliance, trying to keep everyone happy, because your allies can declare war on another, and you will have to make a decision in that particular aspect. Trading away territory, of course, is very useful, and it would also generate a significant amount of money in the process. Like Grimgor this particular turn, while I don't have any money right here, and for whatever reason, he's decided that I'm the main threat in his campaign for whatever reason. If I trade territory, obviously the diplomatic benefit is certainly significant, but so is the financial benefit of a particular campaign. For instance, like selling Mount Silverspear over there to Grimgor. It's not a lot of money right at that point, but that's because Grimgor has already given me a lot of his money. I think I've just bled him dry, if you will, in that situation. It's fun playing as Kislev and just spending a lot of the money you're earning on freaking structures that are not really that great. That's how Kislev feels like to play quite a lot of the times. Now, that's diplomacy. Let's talk about confederations. Now, in this campaign, I've confederated Katrin. Now, generally speaking, when it comes to confederations, usually easier to confederate a faction that's weak. Like, say, for instance, you make a military alliance with Prague. The way you could do so is you move more resources in Yetkich, you trade that to Prague. Keep in mind that whenever you trade territory to a faction, you will get a confederation. You will suffer in terms of confederation. I guess it's because the faction is considered stronger, so they're less likely to confederate with you. But you can trade the Yetkich to Prague, and it's a rune settlement, so you don't even have to declare war on the Norskans. Trade the Yetkich to Prague, maybe get a military alliance with them. One of the ways to get those kind of agreements, the AI will value territories that have barracks in them. Like, any kind of military buildings are going to be highly valued by the AI. So if you were to, say, build up Yetkich and build a barracks there, Prague would certainly like that. But they would like it regardless. Also, the AI does care, as I said, about certain territories that they want to take under their control. Yetkich is one of those, I imagine, for Prague. So you could get the military alliance that way with Prague. And once you get the military alliance, here's where you can really start screwing over the AI in order to get the confederation. Prague doesn't start at war with Vlad, but he is likely to declare war on them. One of the things you can do, since they will dislike one another from the very beginning, one of the things you can do is get that military alliance and then you declare war on Vlad. You should have vision with him by this point. Or you declare war on a faction like that, then your military allies will be obliged to help out. And then what's going to happen to Prague, and this is really the key to achieving confederations with any factions, major factions, minor factions, what you do then is you let Vlad beat them around a bit. Maybe they lay siege to Prague itself. It doesn't matter how far they get. But at one point, since Prague is going to be weak, they will offer up the confederation. Now, the problem with that particular approach, and this is where we get into a bit of an issue, you're going to have a situation where you're going to gain territory for that confederation that is going to be vulnerable to AI attack. That is the downside. Of course, the upsides of confederations are many. So, in this campaign, the way I confederate Katrin, now, keeping in mind, Katrin had Helpit, she had Prague, she had Kislev, she had the Southern Oblast, she had the Ostermark. How did I manage to confederate Katrin? Here's what I did. And she also had Talabaim, so she had a lot of territory, multiple armies. I got the military alliance with her, and then I declared the war on Vlad. She joined in. She was also at war with Draika. And because of that, Vlad and Draika, they weren't able to defeat Katrin, but they were certainly able to push her back. And because of that situation, she lost her main army. She got completely defeated on the field of battle. Like, this army right here is one that I recruited. It's not an army she recruited. Because she lost that army, that main army, she ended up being weak. She still had 3 armies on the field, but Vlad had quite a few. Draika had, basically between Draika and Vlad, there were 5 armies against Katrin's 3. And at that point, Katrin offered to confederate, like I was able to confederate Katrin. So that's one of the ways you can do it. You get the military alliance with the faction, or you get good diplomatic relations with the faction, usually a military alliance. You declare war on a common. You join either their wars that they have on an enemy, but you don't help them out, and you just hope that enemy will end up winning. Or you just declare war yourself on an enemy, and you wait for the AI, for the enemy to beat them down, weaken them. Doesn't matter if whoever wins. And in fact, you would ideally want your AI partner to win, but you'd also want them to lose enough units that they are willing to confederate. Another way to achieve confederations is to prevent AI from becoming very powerful. So basically, one of the things you can do, say for instance, if you're playing Xiao Ming in Cafe, like if you're playing Miao Ying, it's much harder to confederate Xiao Ming. But if you're playing Xiao Ming, one of the things you can do is you race over here against Miao Ying to take over the Forest of the Moon, because she's gonna try and get this territory herself. You race over here, you take the Forest of the Moon, and that means Miao Ying is gonna end up with limited territory. She's just gonna have 2 provinces, and she's gonna have the full brunt of the Force of the Cask coming from the Bastion, and that means she'll be more likely, more susceptible to confederations. So in this campaign, I haven't confederate Castalton yet, but I have also created a situation, not completely under my control, I might add, but I've created a situation where if Castalton suffers enough casualties, he might just very well end up in a situation where he might be vulnerable to confederation. One of the things you can also use when it comes to helping out for confederations is to request an army. So over here, like let's say I request this particular army, and I've gained it. You can see that Castalton is more eager to confederate with me. Now, he's also in a bit of a jam right here, because while he certainly does have forces, substantial forces at that, he's kind of exposed over here. Like, his army is in a territory where he can take a lot of attrition, not necessarily right here, but in the mountains of Naglfari, absolutely. And he's likely to lose this army on next turn to Trog. This one is in a bit of a better position, but Wulfric is probably going to be able to defeat that. And if that does happen, and since I have control of the loaned army, if he loses those 2 forces, I am going to be able to confederate with him in this campaign and gain a lot of this territory for myself. That would be the key. Like, I'm not at war with Wulfric. I defeated enough of Wulfric's army. Is in fact the reason Castalton got as far as he did over here, taking all of this territory, is because I helped them. Like, I took the Tower of Crack. He's taken like the territory in the High Stuft Mountains, other settlements, but he only got as far as he did because I eliminated several of Wulfric's armies. And because of that, Wulfric was vulnerable. It takes the AI, like when the AI loses an entire army, it takes them several turns to recover from that, it takes them several turns to recruit. So Castalton suddenly found himself in a position where he had multiple armies and Wulfric had none. And now Wulfric's been playing catch up, but he has been able to recover at this point. So now he's going to pressure Castalton, likely take the Sarl encampment over here, put that pressure on Castalton, and Castalton's not really going to have a good answer to that. Now, again, I wouldn't necessarily want to trigger a war right here. My armies are a bit busy at the moment. Like, waging a multi-front war across the vast array of territory as Kislev is not a great experience. Your weak economy is certainly something that's felt. People that say that Kislev is fine, I'm going to tell you, managing a campaign like this as Kislev is a bloody pain in the neck. Because you just don't have the economy to sustain a lot of armies. Yes, I have 10 armies over here in this campaign, absolutely. I would have well over 20 if I was playing something like Grimgor, maybe even more at this point. Well, sure, my economy would be in the red if I was playing Grimgor. I would at least be able to afford those kind of armies. And individually, they'd also be stronger armies as well, with higher tier units as well. So one of the problems. So yeah, I'm a bit busy. I would rather not have to fight Wulfric right now. But if it takes a declaration of war to get some of those results in a campaign, that is what I'm certainly going to sign up for. But yeah, confederations are just about manipulating the AI in wars that, even if it wins, like, it depends on how strong their opponents are. Now, at the same time, ideally, If you know the AI is going to face a weak opponent and they can win, you want to cut them off. One crucial aspect to understand, the AI is not willing to move for a territory that it doesn't control, but it's under the control of an ally. So for instance, right, for instance, Miao Ying, like the reason this buffer zone is so important, Miao Ying is not going to move for my territory to declare war on Grimgor. They're just not going to take that risk, because one of the reasons behind that is I could certainly join Grimgor in wiping out Cafe, if I so desire. It's prime real estate. Why wouldn't I join Grimgor? I mean, I can take almost all of Cafe as Kislev. It's like, and I wouldn't have to fight Grimgor, which is again something to be avoided. But, and that's something to keep in mind with AI factions you're looking to confederate. Like, you want to manipulate the situation in your favor, but you either isolate them or you put them in a vulnerable position, or you engineer a situation where they're in a vulnerable position. Let's say you take a territory. Like, I took the Tower of Crack, had defeated Wolfric's armies, got a peace agreement, sold the Tower of Crack to Castalton. Guess what Castalton's going to do? He's going to try and then take control of the rest of the province, which will inevitably push him in a vulnerable position. Because the Sarl encampment is a bitch of a region to actually control and defend if you don't have the Tower of Crack. If you have the Tower of Crack, sure. Like if you're coming in from the north to the south, it's one thing. But if you're trying to push north, it's really miserable if you don't control the mountains of hell, for instance, at the very least. And pushing for the middle of Norska is always an issue. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Christine here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.